This is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready. We're about to live in your head rent-free.
Hello, Otterites. This is episode 204. I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
I'm Cajun.
And I'm Marcus.
They haven't quite figured out what the order those last two are going in.
That worked very well, though.
We both like bringing up the rear, I think.
Yeah, we'll switch up.
I've heard that about both of you.
Oh, switch it.
Switch hitting, yes.
Switch hitting, yes.
So,
That's
Otterites,
explicit.
Yeah, there goes the explicit
So
letter.
much for that.
Yeah.
we were just debating about that whole idea of explicit label or not. So this is Code of Honor.
Code of Honor, yes.
Code of Honor.
Great.
Our,
Love it,
Our
love it.
favorite episode to work on.
Yep.
And I think in the wake of that whole
2-hour episode.
snakes and beavers and the
Serpents and beavers.
Serpents and beavers and the 2-hour episode. Those serpents and beavers, guys, I'm glad they're gone.
Yeah.
Yes,
tell you
very
what,
true, very true.
that cat, that Dr. Caligula left a lot of instruments lying around. They're pretty fucking weird.
Yeah, that's signet
Well,
ring.
Whoa, he said the word.
Well, yeah. Well, I think
You
we're
left
gonna
a
keep
bad
the
taste
explicit
in my
label.
I
mouth.
guess we're leaning into the explicit now.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
apparently so.
Well, Robert can always bleep that out for me.
Like a bad taste in your mouth.
No.
And
Baby.
then one
I
of
hear
them,
parsley takes care of that.
one of them
I
clogged
don't
up the
know.
shitter too. So, you know,
Pineapple.
Shitter's full.
That's because Annihilus does a pretty good job of that when he's.
So it was pretty weird to have those guys around. I'm glad they're gone. That whole dimensional warp thing. But in the wake of all that, we've decided to try an experiment with this episode.
Yes.
And
Code of
instead
Honor,
of-
I really let that go too long last time, but
Yeah,
it was so much good discussion.
it was good
You know,
stuff.
it is.
It really was.
But we want to try to get back on track a little bit, and I'll set aside all of that explicit there that we were doing at the beginning, and we'll get serious here. And we're going to work on a single quote, and that quote will be up to the captain. If this experiment works, we may continue it. And of course, as we know, the captain for Code of Honor is the host. And so, yes, we are at Studio M, 30th floor of the Nakatomi Plaza, down the hall from Ellis. And
behind the waterfall.
behind the waterfall.
Just down the hall from Ellis.
So I am going to
Again, never gets old.
No.
Never gets old.
So of course, when old Martin here is kicking out the quotes, you can expect them to be from either Ronald Reagan, P.J. O'Rourke, or Friedrich Nietzsche.
Not necessarily in that order.
No, so that's an unusual trinity, but
Some people would say it's not. But, I think it's an interesting trinity.
When you finally break that mode, it will be an amazing moment for everyone. What?
Yeah.
What? He moved outside that?
Yeah,
He
I mean,
grew-
he's done a lot of quotes outside.
Yes,
this.
I
you know,
I'm giving him crap.
O'Rourke and Nietzsche, okay, but Reagan and Nietzsche,
Or
there's a-
O'Rourke and Reagan.
Well, I think
I think-
O'Rourke would have considered himself a Reaganite, even
Yeah.
though he kind of,
Well,
it was his job to kind of poke fun at every politician.
Yes, but
Mhm.
I think he goes in with that 80s vibe very well.
Yes, yes.
So,
So, of course, I picked Nietzsche.
of
Yeah,
course.
it's been a while since we've done Friedrich, and
Old Fred.
yeah, that's right.
And Fred's quite the mustache hero for me, too.
Well, I will grant you
This
that.
is true.
yes.
Yeah, he was. He
Yes.
was very, very. Yes. Very,
My newest mustache hero is Umberto I of Italy, House of Savoy.
Oh.
As he aged, his mustache looked like he had a Persian cat growing out of his face.
oh Lord.
It was something else.
So that's your goal.
That's my goal.
Martin's mustache goal is Persian cat.
Yes.
That's
So-
it. You're going to let the nose hairs grow into the mustache and blend in. It'll be a nose stash.
I may do that.
Oh,
yes.
As long as he doesn't braid them.
I was just going to say he needs to braid them.
A Salvador Dali kind of thing.
So I've got the product working. You got to do product when you're doing the curl. So
Mhm.
it's looking pretty good. I
Yeah.
like it.
Your one on the right, your right is looking really good. I think the one on your left is drooping a little.
Yeah, I may not have quite as much product in it.
Well, the left always droops compared to the right.
It's
yeah,
you know,
I caught that.
kind of
Is that female or male anatomy?
More low hanging fruit.
More political philosophy.
Oh.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, actually, it covers both sides. Of
It
the-
does. You
Mhm.
could.
all right. So
Anyways, back to Code of Honor.
Code of Honor. So what we're going to do here is, again, this is an experiment. I'm going to throw one out, and then let's see what the guys have to say about it. And they are welcome to respond with quotes of their own. And of course, we'll let Robert probably do some conclusion for us at the end.
Absolutely, yeah. I think
Hammer
we
this
we
in.
should keep that. Yeah.
Keep that feature. So this is a Nietzsche. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Ken. I just read that just yesterday. I was looking through some quotes and come across that
Really?
particular
Yeah.
one. It was shortened just a little bit there on the back end, but
So,
Mhm.
Martin, before we dive deep into this, this sounds like something we've covered before. Has this quote come up in discussion before?
I
Don't
think so.
believe so. I tried
No.
to make sure. I know we've done 2 or 3 Nietzsche's before,
Yes.
and I tried to find one we had because I know we did the one about if you start staring into the abyss, make sure the abyss does not stare back
Right.
into you.
Yeah.
And maybe we've
Mhm.
just talked about this concept in other places.
Yes.
It is a recurring theme for
And-
us.
and
in
again,
Well, we were
it's-
kind of talking about it earlier.
well, I think,
In our
yeah,
last
Manson,
episode, the
It
Manson.
follows
Well,
on
yes.
with Manson.
Martin,
Yeah.
I think you've hit a nerve here, which we can really go deep with. So bravo on that. We'll see if we can pull it off here. But you're exactly right. We talked about the power of propaganda
Yes.
and about the power of social conditioning is what you're talking about here.
Yes, the
Now,
group think, the social
groupthink, that's
conditioning.
probably the best word for it. What Nietzsche is, I mean, he's almost kind of being a little bit flippant with that first part about individuals not being insane because we know factually that's not true.
well, but he says it's,
It's
rare.
rare.
It is
Mhm.
rare. That's
Rare.
right. And but what he and I suppose if you look percentage wise, even though
Well.
at his time they didn't understand it
Right.
like we do today.
I would say even today, insanity is more rare than we
Yeah.
think. What we think of as insane.
Genuinely
Yeah.
crippling
Is
mental
prob-
illness is probably
It-
rare.
yeah,
Well,
that's what he.
But I think
How do you
what we
define
would
that?
call insane today is more just being a psychopath or a sociopath.
Mhm.
Right, which
Well-
can be absorbed and tolerated.
Now,
Yes.
now, mind you,
Well.
insanity is rare. Stupidity, on the other hand, is a whole nother matter.
It's
That is
not.
rampant.
Which, in
That's
many
rampant.
respects, is exactly what Nietzsche is saying here. He is speaking of this group think to do what is, shall I say, not always in its best interests.
Unspeakable. Yeah, it's
I
much
think what is
easier to talk a
unspeakable-
group into doing something unspeakable.
Well, that's right. I mean, it goes
Mhm.
back to that great line from Men in Black, the first Men in Black,
Yeah.
when Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones are talking,
Mhm.
and he says, "Well, people can be." An individual can be smart, but people are insane.
Or I think it's people are
Irrational.
dumb.
Irrational, dumb animals, panicky animals, and you know it. That's not exactly right, but
Something
it's
along
close
those
to
Close.
that.
Yeah.
And he's exactly right. Because we are herd creatures still. That has never
Communal
left,
creatures.
Yeah, that's a better word for it.
Yeah.
But it goes back to our evolutionary DNA. It's the only way we could
Yeah.
survive is by group working together.
Yeah.
It led rise to our ability to cooperate and things like that. Nevertheless, we are, for our own protection, we are very susceptible. I think that's a good word for this.
When there's gaps in our experiences and knowledge, one of the easy ways to then to fill that gap is to do what everybody else is doing.
Yes, but see but we all know those stories, and time travel is full of them. Those time travel stories, when you talk about it, where the one person knows the truth, or the small group knows the truth, and nobody listens because they're speaking something that is not necessarily outside of experience, but they're just simply going against the sign of the times, trend of the times.
You guys have probably read Shirley Jackson's The
The
Lottery.
lottery, correct? That's
Oh,
a
yes,
very good
yes.
example. That's
great.
one of the most
great
famous
story.
short stories ever written. Yeah, and it is in many respects this really well written dystopian outlook
Yeah.
where we can.
Oh, hold on, wait a minute. Word boner.
Oh, okay, I'll take that. Yeah,
Dystopian gets one.
okay, yeah. Outlook where we as a group simply agree that to do a terrible, awful, immoral thing, which goes back to democracy, and I'm going to point right over to Robert because he's pointing to me.
Yes, because I've always thought this came to mind with the lottery.
Watch that finger.
Yeah, I'm pointing right here. I'm touching here in the part that
mixing
doesn't have
board.
buttons. The lottery evokes the woman caught in adultery. For me.
Oh, yes, it does. That's correct. yeah.
And it is a
Never
very
made the
similar
connection.
thing. What happens there is, of course, the leaders of the community and of course the rabble,
Mhm.
have gathered to stone this woman caught in adultery, which is interesting because it takes two to be caught in adultery.
Yeah, nobody's stoning the dude.
Nobody's stoning the
That's right,
dude.
yeah.
Or
Of
he,
course.
I mean, presumably, he gets his later, but actually he already got his, I
He
guess,
got his.
technically. But anyways,
Yeah, and Jewish law was very patronymic in many ways.
yes.
Male oriented.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
There you go. Give him another one.
Oh,
Word boner.
okay. Well, thank you.
Patronymic.
That's-
You
that's-
gotta
Yes,
love
that,
patronymic.
I think that's worthy. So, in this story, probably more people are going to be aware of this story than the lottery. Unfortunately, I mean, they're both worthy of knowing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But in the story of the woman caught in adultery, it does exactly what we're talking about here. It is the group think. The group has gotten together individually. Only a few of those would have been zealot enough to grab that woman and personally, on their own, stone her. And especially if there was a crowd watching while that one person did it.
Right.
Okay.
Yet together, they're willing to do this. And then Jesus comes along,
Yeah.
and they want him, because they're going to try and trap him, as they often
Mhm.
do, to throw that first stone.
No.
They want him to participate.
They're so incensed by his very existence, they're willing to drop their herd mentality long enough to attempt to discredit him.
I don't think it's that, because I think the herd mentality is part of what
Yeah,
causes them to want to discredit
There's
him.
some nuance.
They
there.
want to
But-
bring him into that mentality. Why
Mhm.
are you
They
not
do.
joining? Why are
Yeah.
you not joining in?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And what he does is he turns it back around to the individual
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
brings sanity to it when he
Right.
says,
Famously.
let
yeah.
Yes.
he who is without sin cast the first stone.
Mhm.
Then it becomes an individual act.
Yes.
And when it becomes an individual act, sanity prevails.
Yes. But perfect example when we were talking about in the last we were talking about in the last episode a lot of the media and what have you, and the influence of the media. And one of the things that we see happening today on a daily basis is someone will do something that's an atrocity. They'll either make a racist comment or they'll be an asshole to somebody. They'll kick a dog, whatever. And
Death penalty.
and what ends up happening is that goes viral on the internet for a second. And then the turning comes. And what happens to that individual that made that one offensive thing that happened to be recorded, and it may be their despicable human being in general,
Or it could be that girl who
or
used a version of the N-word in a video when she was like 15
Yeah,
and
exactly.
lost her
Could be.
college future.
So what ends up happening is you lose your job, you lose your house, you're ostracized from society. You're basically completely demonized by society as a whole. And if one person goes to stand up to say you shouldn't do this to another human being, which is much worse than what the person did originally, what they're getting back. If somebody goes to stand up, then the crowd turns on them.
Yep.
It's that herd mentality gone rampant, but it's not even that it's on a daily basis. It's on a constant basis because that news cycle is from around the world. So somebody breaks wind in Japan, we hear about it in the U.S.
Susami.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because what you're talking about is something that is extra legal.
Yes.
It has nothing
Yes.
to do with the
No.
legal process,
It's
which
a-
we
what
have
do they call it?
enshrined in our
A-
Constitution to
well,
allow.
It's
But
digital
it's
lynching.
perception.
But you know what? That extra legal standards
Mm-hmm.
used to be the basis of a healthy culture, in the sense that you don't do that because it's just, we all know it's wrong. Why would you even think
Sure,
of doing
I mean,
that? It has been bastardized.
But yeah, the
Into what it-
punishments outweigh the crime.
It's been
now.
used.
Yeah.
It's been
But it's
because
okay to
there's no
stone them.
morals. There's no moral underpinning for the extra legal
No
process.
balance.
No.
Well, but that's just it. There used to be.
There used to be, and that's
There
correct.
used to
Yes.
be.
because it's now been weaponized.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't weaponized before, in the sense that, now just an accusation
Yes.
is enough. Doesn't have to be real.
That-
Yeah.
To go back to your biblical analogy, though, stoning was legal in the cases that they had here.
It
That's
was, yes.
that's the
Yeah.
underpinning of that. And Jesus is here attempting to point out the fact that this law is unjust and always was.
What we're ending up with now is, on an hourly basis, we're having a repeat of Emmett Till.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a very
It's a-
sideway turnaround.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
But
digital
It's
lynching.
it's a digital lynching.
You'll
And
have
yet
to
some
refresh
cases
me
it
on Emmett
is
Till.
deserved.
In some cases, it
Hold on.
may be deserved,
Yeah.
but what is the limit to how far they're going deserved?
there is
Well,
no
Almost
punishment.
never.
Yeah.
Almost never.
Yeah.
Cajun, you had a
You had a
question.
question?
Who
You
is?
have to refresh me on Emmett Till. That was
Yeah.
not
So
bringing
listeners
to
may
mind
not
the
get that
memory.
either.
Emmett Till was a 14-year-old black man
Mhm.
from Chicago who was visiting family in Mississippi.
In 1950.
It's about 54,
Or-
56,
Yeah,
something like that.
along those lines.
He was accused of propositioning a white woman in a grocery store and
False accusation. mind you.
subsequently essentially disappeared. His body was found by a stream a few
Mutilated.
days later, mutilated.
Oh, there's so many of that going on. That's why the name didn't.
Well,
Yeah.
Well-
this one
on
became a
that.
big deal because his mother took his body back to Chicago and had an open casket at
Yeah.
the funeral.
and
and it
that's
became a
changed,
thing.
changed everything in many respects.
She
Exactly.
made a stand then to demonstrate
Against the-
what had happened to her son,
and shed the light on what was
Mhm.
common practice, as you say,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
South.
put a real
And
light
in many
on.
respects,
on him.
brought an end, the beginning of the end to all that,
Yeah,
just
it's-
by having that moment.
He was one of the early, civil rights martyrs. That, again,
Yeah.
kind of
Right.
precedes the three
But-
men in the dam and
What
all
was that? There was a movie about it called Mississippi Burning. What was the
Yes.
town? It was a prosperous black town that was
it
burned
was,
out.
I don't recall.
yeah,
Bridge.
we-
There's a bridge there.
We'll have to check that one out.
But
But
anyways,
I'm not
that-
sure.
but that's a prime example on an even greater scale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, a more current movie. I just saw it. It was on TBS actually, and it's 100 Years from Mississippi.
Yes.
The woman's name was Mammy Lane Copeland,
Mhm.
and at
Probably Mamie.
111-year-old, she went back to Mississippi. Her family ran from there when her father was almost lynched, and it goes into all of the lynchings and so forth down that way. And excellent movie. Not quite a documentary, but it's kind of borderline blend. Excellent. I suggest to anybody that hasn't seen that, try to catch that. It's really
100 years from Mississippi.
100 years from Mississippi. It took her 100 years to go back.
Mhm.
Family ran when she was like 10 or 11, and she was like 110 before she actually went back.
Wow.
Holy crap!
Wow.
I'm impressed she lasted
sons
that
and
long.
daughters talked to her and go, and she was very, very coherent. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all the faculties there and everything, and just amazing. And she passed like the year after she went.
Yeah.
It's worth a watch. I highly advise it.
So, one of the things that strikes me about this, and Marcus, the Imperator here, really has touched on it, is since Cajun and Imperator have joined us, the idea of individualism and the individual is back more on my mind. I've brought it up many times, but they are such unique individuals
That's
joining
kind.
us. No, but
We are the sheepdogs compared to the herd.
I think so. I like that. But the dynamic that we've introduced
Mhm.
with going from 3 to 5, there's an argument that can be made that Francis Robert and I are 3 slices of bread from the same loaf.
there's some truth to that.
Uh-huh.
At the very least,
Sounds
similar
more
level.
crusty and sounds more soft in the center. So
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so but Marcus and Cajun are different. They're different guys.
Absolutely.
And I
Proudly.
appreciate that change in our direction.
I think
Well-
it's we have talked about this, how different the three of us are, because there are a lot of differences in the three of us.
Mhm.
Now, in a lot of our views and our philosophical beliefs, there is a lot of similarity, but we each come from very unique backgrounds.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah,
take the
absolutely.
bread. Below the crust, it's all the same going back there, but the crust is very uneven and different.
Mhm.
And I think his analogy was very spot on when you look at it from the two different depths of the bread loaf.
Yeah. So it just the
But it's definitely Wonder
concept-
Bread.
Yeah, the concept.
I wonder where y'all came from sometimes. Yeah.
And of course this was Nietzsche's. And the hard part about this quote I'll just mention is I was not able to find a year or a work for
Okay.
this quote. And as we know, early Nietzsche is a little different from later Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And of course, once his sister gets a hold of it,
How
It
much of
becomes
is
even
true-
more
The
different.
thief.
yeah.
How much
The thief-
truly is Nietzsche and how much
Yeah.
is not her?
it's really hard to distinguish because his sister, of course, turned it into
Usurped his words.
exactly.
Cash.
Give him one. Word boner. Usurp is government. So that's what. Yeah, that's
Well,
awesome.
Another issue, another point, kind of with this groupthink mentality coming out of the Holocaust.
I'm glad you went there. 'Cause, we needed
Let's
to go
look
there.
at Anne Frank
Yeah,
and her diary.
yeah,
What was actually in the diary and what was published, completely different things.
Mhm.
Give a completely different impression of this young lady because her father edited it.
hmm
And what's popular is the edited version.
Right.
So, I mean, coming out of
It's been
the whole
cleansed.
group thing, it's
Yeah.
been cleansed.
yeah.
Uh,
But this is a constant recurring theme throughout, especially early Nietzsche, about being your own self, being an individual.
Mhm.
And it just strikes me that, yes, he's so right. It's, individuals, when you consider your own needs, don't do crazy shit.
Enlightened self-interest prevents that.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. When
And
you
somehow that's muted in a
right,
large group.
when you act in your own interest, you don't do crazy shit. Putin by himself doesn't invade Ukraine, but as a power mad jerkweed at the head of a giant military force, it makes sense suddenly to invade Ukraine.
Robert,
I don't know. I don't know that I 100% agree with when you act in your own self-interest, you don't do crazy shit. Because I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but to me that just rings false to a large degree.
Yeah, because selfishness makes
Yes.
us
Yeah,
stupid.
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
fine.
So
You know,
there's truth to that.
Ponzi schemes wouldn't exist without people doing that.
Well, that's part of the group thing.
That
though,
is a
you
group
know.
thing too.
But I mean, people often will do in what they perceive as their best interest. And if you're going to go Nietzsche, you have to let them define their own their own
Oh yeah,
best
That-
self.
and that is an issue with
And-
Nietzschean thought.
Right.
is-
And to be honest, that's where we are today. Today, you could say today, just in that one aspect at the very least, is a very Nietzschean society.
yeah, it's you get
Um,
to define your own good, your own morals.
Right.
Yeah, your own worldview.
And in
Yeah.
that, once you do that, you have elevated your rights above all else,
Mm-hmm.
always and everywhere. I mean,
Oh, well,
there is
Your
no way.
your needs,
Yes,
your needs
Yeah,
above
well,
others.
Or
Yes, but
desires.
You,
limit-
you
yeah.
always couch it though.
Oh,
it's
yes,
your
desires.
rights. You always couch it as rights.
Yes,
though.
you're exactly right.
You always
People,
couch it as rights.
they couch their desires as
their
their
right.
rights.
Yeah, it's the only
And-
way to assure that it happens.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Very, very perceptive.
And once you do that, you have severed yourself from all corresponding responsibilities. And in my opinion, you have totally broken with and discarded the social contract.
I was going to say social contract is exactly where I was hoping that you were going to end up with that. It leads to chaos and anarchy. Am I
It
correct
does.
on that?
It does. Yeah, I think it does.
Because
And
if
you're right.
my truth is automatically the highest good, and no matter what it is, and it's not based on anything other than desire, then ultimately, where does the law have a right, if any, to mitigate that? And there are many that say, no, abortion is the easy one. I have a right to do as I will. And that is the highest good above all else, including human life. Well, if that's the case, then logic extension is then life matters not anyway.
Well, no other person matters.
No other person matters. That's correct. So why are there laws against murder?
Well,
why are there laws
but-
against that?
right.
Let's have
Yeah,
one
One
have
of the things that
Marcus.
we run into nowadays with the internet, specifically, is and what is it that they always talk about? It's something 32 or what have you, about anything you could think of is already out there on, as far as porn or what have
Yeah.
you. But
If you can think of it, it's already been done.
Already been done.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens is an individual who's expressing these extreme individualistic beliefs or what have you, once they post that or once they go and search for that, they can find it on the internet.
Yeah.
But what's happening now
That's
is
because Facebook listens to everything. And
but what happens now is the algorithms twist that
Yeah.
because they want to draw you back in. Once you search for something, it's everywhere on in
Yes,
everything
it
you
is.
see.
That's true.
it's one of the things I was going to mention in the last episode.
It's reinforced.
When we go on our social media or on Amazon,
Mhm.
because of what we have discussed here, how long is it going to be before we see Charles Manson stuff show up in our
Exactly.
feeds?
So what ends up
Okay.
happening
Yeah, all our
is
phones are sitting right here and listening.
Right.
It
Now,
goes-
you did research. You searched, right?
Yes.
All right. None of us did,
No,
I think.
I
Did you?
looked.
I read Wikipedia. Yeah.
Well, and I did Wikipedia here, so I don't know how much.
Well, I
that
looked
will
for the
track
audio
into it.
articles and so forth, like
Yeah, I did.
the
But-
Danny Trejo.
But
stuff and so
I'm
forth.
willing to bet that all that stuff is going to start showing up
Exactly.
in our feeds.
So what ends up happening is it goes from individualism,
Yeah.
okay, to mob mentality in
Yeah.
30 seconds because they've got a whole group, even if it's a minority, 0.1% of the world population. You're still talking about 100,000 people online
They
that
can make a
have-
lot of noise.
that have the exact same mind frame that you do for whatever sick, twisted thing you've got. Whether you're a racist, a bigot, whatever. Even if it's a particular kink that you're into.
Right. Because let the kink, right?
Exactly.
As we know, yes.
So,
Kink is kink.
we don't have individualism anymore because of this internet.
Yeah.
What happens is it's instantly turned into a mob mentality
It's-
and group thing.
Yes, tribal identity is
Exactly.
massive.
Yes, the
And
tribal
you
identity-
seek out tribal identity.
In the
You got it.
guise of individualism.
Exactly.
Has
I'm
trumped
gonna get
everything.
I'm gonna get a tattoo so I can be an individual just like everyone else.
Exactly. And it is.
I thought
for
you
what-
already had a Panama City license plate there on your lower back. Butterflies.
butterflies, pink ones.
Yeah.
What you were talking about, Imperator, with the with social media. It's not just social media.
Mm-hmm.
The group think in the past would have been mostly a top-down kind of a thing,
Mm-hmm.
imposed by a fascist government, for
Yeah.
instance. Now, groupthink, it's still kind of a top-down, but it's coming from,
It takes a trigger.
well, no, that's not what I mean. It's coming from structures that the people have built.
Yes.
And so groupthink is forced upon people by default
Mm-hmm.
because everything is designed to be an echo chamber of your own beliefs.
Yes.
Okay.
And it reinforces everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we believe something like Snakes and Otters is so important. We like to challenge those kinds of things. We like to throw subjects out there that
Mhm.
hopefully will make people think and examine, not hate or get angry just because you think, oh, well, that's wrong. Why is it wrong? Or why is it right?
Critical thinking, which is something we
It's
learned
the
at
critical thinking, right?
Bellarmine
It goes
taught
back
us
to
that.
our roots at Bellarmine.
Absolutely, they taught us that.
Sharpens the blade. So yeah, I mean, I want to circle back here. I think Francis really did examine it and bring to light the critical flaw in Nietzschean thinking. There's a lot to admire here.
There is. Even I got to admit that.
I mean, individualism and seeking your own. You know, he would term it the will to power, but we would term it, you know, seeking your own self actualization or seeking your own
Your form of meaning.
your self improvement.
Think
Um,
for yourself.
Being a seeker, thinking for yourself
Being the best version of yourself is the
current.
is the current.
You know, and again, it's why I admire our change and what we've done here in adding Cajun and and Marcus, it's so challenging to me, and to make me continue to examine my individuality,
Mhm.
that I feel like I am different from others, not in a way that makes them less, but just makes me different. But that fatal flaw can be that it becomes selfish. It does become,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I am central and you are nothing.
It's that second part that's the problem, because by
Yes.
definition
Mhm.
we all work out of our own self as our perspective.
Right. We
Right.
can't get out of our own head. That's
We
impossible.
can't do that. That's
right.
right.
I mean, there was a lot to admire in Nietzsche, but the flaw being, once you go there, it's not hard to do what his sister did
Mhm.
and turn it into, I'm much more than you. I am the Ubermensch, and you then
Or
are
the Untermensch.
are nothing.
Mhm.
You are then
Yes.
fodder to
Ah,
be ground down into my will to power.
yeah, the
And
grist.
that's
Mhm.
not what he meant at all.
No, that's right.
It's not what he wanted at all. He rejected nationalism. He rejected anti-Semitism, but his
It could be
illness
used
and his,
for that, yeah.
his sister then took it and twisted it to that level. And unfortunately, it's not difficult to get there.
Right. But
Mhm.
if you remove that essential element that she essentially did, that you have to have a respect for the dignity and sanctity of all human life.
You have to respect that the others
Yeah, and
can
that's dignity.
need to
That's correct.
then seek their own will to power.
That's correct. And that there must be a cohesion between these, an agreed upon way for all to, I mean, live and let
Yes.
live is not. I mean, it's been it's been an often pillared uh, saying, but there is some truth to that. It has to exist in that.
Yeah, you
because
have
we
to
are-
give other people room to grow.
Well, you
But then again, but within limits.
see that's part of the problem
Yes.
that I have with
Limits.
and certainly if we went back and to our Nietzsche episodes, I probably said stuff like this there. But
I'm
one of
sure,
the problems I
Yeah.
had with Nietzsche before was that whether he meant it in a different way than he still wrote it the way he wrote it.
Mhm.
And scholars can argue, well, did he really mean this, or is this truly his sister adulterating it?
Or how much is lost in the translation?
much is
Again,
lost
he's
in
writing in
translation.
German, and there's probably senses and context in German that don't exist in English.
Quite possibly, but I think still there's too much of his writing and again, it may be that this is just the natural conclusion, so it means he's either a very sloppy thinker and writer, which is not what we would normally associate with Nietzsche,
Agreed.
or he truly lost sight of that communal responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think that is true. Whether he intended to go there or not, that's I think where he ended up.
Because
Uh,
ultimately it ends in extreme Darwinism.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
and
full individual.
it was not his
reaffectualization.
intention,
Right.
I don't think.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's, like you guys say, responsibility, life's a knowing backpack.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right. Yeah,
Mhm.
there is.
You have a responsibility to others. We may not like that, but in the end, I don't think individualism is at odds with responsibility to others.
No, it's not, and I'll
Because-
tell you why.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Robert. Yes, do it.
Because it is only the individual can be responsible for others. Once the group is responsible for others, no one is. Because
Right.
if we all are, no one is.
You essentially abrogate your
Yes.
responsibility to
Mhm.
others.
Yes.
Right.
Because we're lazy. If we can say, well, that's somebody else's
And then
job,
that's
then
Yeah.
that's somebody else's job.
which ultimately makes it no one's.
Well,
Which makes
I
it
who
mean,
no
makes it
one's.
the government's, and we don't care.
there
Right.
was-
And once the government starts taking over all those jobs and responsibilities, well,
Then you end up with billions of dollars sent to Ukraine. Oh,
well, I mean,
Well,
there was
it's
a,
the-
a
Not enough
Are
lube
you
there.
are you sure it was billions of dollars that went to Ukraine? Because I'm not entirely sure all of it went there.
I don't think all of it. I think some of it may have gone there and come back.
some of it went
That
up
could be.
somebody's nose.
That could very well. Well, it might have been left in various courtrooms and hallways in the White House.
Offices, yeah.
Yes. So Robert, how are we doing on time, brother?
We are at 34, almost 35 minutes.
Perfect.
it's bourbonized in
let's,
age.
I think this is
let's
bourbon.
take the
Yeah.
hit the button for me, brother.
Yes. Let's go. Bourbon break.
All right. So I have poured a shot of, poured a whole bottle
Are you trying to imitate me?
of Old Fitzgerald, which is a local product. It is made here in Louisville,
There's quite a bit made here.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
and $12 bottle. And you know what? It's not terrible.
Okay.
It's not
Never
terrible.
featured it before.
It's,
It's totally
kind
brand new.
of straightforward.
But you know what?
It's not complex, but it's not terrible.
I gotta say, given the effusive praise that we have heaped upon other bourbons, saying that it's not terrible puts it like in the scale of our compliments, like one step above what we said about the Trader Joe's.
No,
I mean, I understand. Yes, you
I
mean
mean,
it better than that.
I mean, certainly, like I said, last episode I had Old Forester Statesman. That's a $50 bottle.
Right. Right.
This is a $12 bottle.
Well, you know, I revisited the Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond from the house, and that was a fine bourbon. It was what you would expect. It's got a lot of the harshness, the burn. It's not a mellow bourbon. I would say it's probably an excellent mixing bourbon as long as you don't. And this is the problem with people who mix. They do not mix to enhance the bourbon. And we did this early on.
You mix to cover it up.
You mix to cover it up. This is our mistake. I mean, it's a beginner mistake. Some people don't grow out of that. And something like that, Heaven Hill, and I bet something
Well,
like
not
this.
necessarily a mistake, but you're just not letting the bourbon reach its full potential.
Right, well,
I mean,
and
if somebody enjoys Coke and bourbon, fine, go for it. Enjoy it if that's what you like. Whether
But if
you're
it tastes like
covered
Coke,
or not.
what's the point?
You know,
It's got kick.
yeah.
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 Well,
There's something to be said for legal use of legalities to feel better.
yeah, and that is true. That is true.
Yeah.
It's certainly something you can guzzle as opposed to sip. We tend to the sipping bourbons. Mixed drinks are more for the guzzlers.
You know, an Old Fitzgerald here. It's again, it's not super complex. I'm not getting
Yes, that's
multiple flavors here, but it's fairly smooth, mellow, kind of woodsy. But no, it's not. I'm going to start calling Cajun the bourbon whisperer.
yes.
He's got those. He's really pulling more flavors. I used to be able to do it, but I'm going to cede to his superiority here. But like with the Monk's Road, that cinnamon at the end. I mean, you just don't get those multiple flavors as it changes on your palate.
Well, good because I worry that because we've bought these bourbons, we judge them by their price point first, and from there we extrapolate. I think that's not fair.
I don't think
No,
we do.
I don't think it.
It's a danger.
because
I'm not saying
because
we
we have
necessarily are.
praised the lower priced bourbons quite
I
often.
understand. That's right, and it's not a but you know.
And we have also
to say
called
this
out.
is not terrible because it's $12. Wait a minute. Let's talk about it on its own merits.
On its own merit. Very
Correct,
good
yeah,
point. Very
that's
good
right.
point. No,
Drop the price in at the end.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
So again, it's mellow,
Yeah.
smooth. I didn't find it harsh at all.
Okay.
You getting any notes of caramel with vanilla or anything like that?
No, more kind of woodsy and smoky, I guess,
Okay.
for my palate. But nothing horrible. Didn't taste like toothpaste.
So to go along with these trends, what I guess we're going to do in our next episode is we're going to break out a bottle of 23-year-old Pappy, and Martin here will be drinking our well bourbon.
There you go. So you're bringing the 23-year-old Pappy?
It's
That's what I heard. Is
but it's
Marcus volunteering to do that?
You know,
We
How-
got to go with range.
how many people can really tell the difference? A
See,
lot of
that's the
people
thing.
say they can.
Well,
Well,
and
I can
that-
provide a pretty decent range.
We
I was
could-
gonna say,
we
and
might want to
experience
do that, a
gives
blind
that a
taste test.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I think that's not a bad idea because I mean, I'll give Martin and I'll give Cajun some primo taste ability just by what you've related on here. I can't do that, and I mean,
Your-
Robert, you'd have to speak for
Your
yourself.
palate's been ruined.
Well,
I keep
soft
hearing
drinks.
that.
Well, it's like the nose. You have sommeliers with
Exactly.
wine, and you have people that can pick up some of the notes,
It
and
is
you
a
have
talent.
people
It
that
is.
pick up
It is.
nothing.
Yeah.
It is.
And
I mean,
it's
some of it's
inherent.
just biological.
Well, I've
that's
definitely
exactly where
got
I'm
the
going.
beak for this.
Well, it's not just the beak, but Martin's point about ruining the palate is a
Mhm.
valid
Oh
one.
yeah.
It is.
But the taste buds regrow quickly.
Yes.
They
So
go and come back very quickly.
after I gave up drinking Cokes almost 2 years ago now, I still occasionally I call it I don't call it going back on this because I think Verner's and Fago are in a totally different category.
Yeah.
And I
That
will
they
have my
are.
occasional Verner. Yes, they are.
You're welcome to my Verner's. It's in the fridge over there.
Oh, awesome.
I don't know. It might be flat.
know.
So
I believe Fago. Isn't that the Juggalo preferred drink of Juggalos? Is Fago?
Juggalos.
Yes. Juggalos.
ICP, Insane Clown Posse.
Ah,
Our
Yeah.
first mention of Insane Clown Posse on the after 200 some episodes.
I believe it is. I believe Fago. That's the
I
I
preferred
believe
you
you
may
drink.
are
be right.
correct.
It's either that or Fanta, and I can never remember which, but I believe it's Fago.
well, it could be. So Fago and Verner's are more of a northern thing. I grew up with them,
Mhm.
and they're not. They really don't have the same kind of feel in your mouth. Even when you drink Cokes, it's very syrupy. You can.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
it's a regional
No,
thing.
I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
please.
Shasta was a big one down here.
Yeah.
That we might remember.
And
from
RC
back-
Cola.
RC.
RC,
is
yes,
very
I
RC
hated
Very
Cola.
RC.
syrupy.
Ah,
Mhm.
never did like RC. But anyways, that's the only carbonated beverage I drink. And honestly, I can't really drink a whole lot of that just because I've been so long away from the carbonation.
Mhm.
It just immediately wants to come right back up.
It especially, well, I guess Coca-Cola will never be a sponsor, but I find Coke especially, the first few sips, I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Then it's like, oh crap, why am I drinking battery acid?
See, I feel that way about
just
Pepsi.
So it's just that I don't know if it's the switch from real sugar to the corn syrup.
It
or
is.
what.
That plays
Yeah.
a big part in it. 'Cause
That's a
I
huge
exclusively buy Mexican
I was gonna say, if you
Coca-Colas,
get the
which
Mexican,
Yeah.
still
it's very different.
uses real cane sugar.
Cane
Well,
sugar.
and then we get kosher Coke on occasion too. Same thing.
But
So,
anyways, that really does have an effect on
yeah.
the palate.
Right.
And
it does.
the if you go back and listen to the episodes over the last 2 years, you will hear me picking up far more than I used to.
This is true. You have created. You've gone further than you began it,
Yeah.
which is
Oh,
should
by
be our
far,
goal.
by far.
It should be
yes.
all our goals.
Yeah, Francis has become a fan of Judge Smale's favorite drink, Fresca.
Absolutely, it's 0 calories, 0 sugar. I mean, it's aspartame, but and it's got a clearness to it with still a hint of sweet. So it's
Well, the sweetness still it's partially that sweetness
I know, that's
is
what's-
what overwhelms your taste
that's
buds.
why I'm
Yeah.
having issues. But I'm trying to do better with it.
Do you know the cat is the only animal that cannot taste sweet?
Yeah,
Wow, that's really depressing.
Of course, you two guys would know
But-
that. Absolutely, yeah.
but it is able to differentiate between individual smells
Mhm.
much better than a human or a dog, even.
Yeah.
And I believe it's dog has like 8 different ones that it can differentiate. Humans have 2 that they can differentiate. And cats have 30. Rats 120. Rats have the best ability to differentiate between smells.
For the animal that will literally eat almost anything.
Exactly.
It can yeah,
But
that makes
it's-
sense.
But it's getting more.
But
it's
maybe
getting
that's
more
because it's
smell
tasting
and more
better
flavor.
notes in it than we
Exactly.
think is there.
It's getting a lot more out of it than you
Perception.
are.
Okay,
That
With
could be.
ability.
Perception.
at that note, let's get back on track with Bourbon,
Bourbon break, yes.
I mean, so Bourbon Break is already a rat hole, a rabbit hole. Now we're in
Into
a
a
rabbit
rat
hole
hole.
of
Yeah.
the rabbit hole.
That's another distillery.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Cajun, what did I pour for you, sir?
Mick, say it for me.
Michter's.
There you go.
Good old Michter's, which is also basically a Louisville brand here locally.
Yes, their Rick House is off 7th Street between
Mhm.
7th and Dixie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's
Yeah.
up there,
So
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
It's,
on Wathen.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's something that we've had here on the show before, and I really liked it. I found it complex.
I remember it. Yeah.
tasty.
Now, it is pretty complex. It's not a sweet style bourbon, but it's not a hot, peppery rye either. It's got a bit of a bite to it. It's more rough. It's like it's got a lot of earthy tones to it. It's like taking leather and dipping it in allspice. It's a nice spiciness
Oh,
there,
man, I'm
but
telling
not
you.
being
leather,
peppery. Like you
yeah.
took some old
Just
horse leather,
nailed
been
it.
sweated on, and a little spice on it, and chewed it for a minute, and Do a little dirt
Wow.
in there too.
That's got to be the best description of any bourbon that we've
That
ever
is
had.
that is the
Yeah.
best in 200 episodes we've ever done.
He is the bourbon whisperer.
And
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
you finish off with some citrus in the back end of it.
Yep. I think the rest of us need to just shut up and let him talk about
I don't know about
Is
that.
that
He can only drink one at a time, though. That's part of the
Are
problem.
you sure
Well,
about
I don't
that?
know
That is
about
terrific.
that.
No, I don't.
That
I
is
know. That's.
terrific.
I think I've proven that wrong before. Now, whether or not I'd be good on picking out the notes would be another story. But I
Yeah,
could
it's-
definitely drink two different ones.
Well,
at
I
the same
understand
time.
that. Yeah.
Well done. So,
Yeah.
Francis, what did I pour
I am
you?
finishing off the last of your Old Forester Statesman.
Statesman, yes.
I don't think I've had this before.
I don't believe you
don't
have.
believe it.
I have not
And
myself.
it is mellow, very mellow. Now, of course, I'm using this with your spherical ice here, and it has no bite whatsoever. I mean, it's almost like you could chug a lug this stuff.
I really love it. And,
Yeah,
and
it is
clearly, if you guys haven't had any of it, I must have drank the whole
you must
bottle.
have, because I don't recall ever having it. And
I don't think
and
I've
was
ever
gonna
had
say, and you know, it is so. Of course, you know, your two spawns may have helped themselves, I suppose. In
I
the
don't think
possible.
so.
The eldest doesn't really partake, does he?
The eldest does have a couple of bottles at his apartment.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he doesn't very frequently. He prefers beer.
Okay,
He's a Corona Extra.
good. That's
Right.
fine.
Now,
As
Cajun just
opposed to
took a
an
sip
IPA.
of mine here, so we're going to ask the Whisperer to tell us what he's picking up over here on this. I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
Yeah.
It's fully bloomed because we've let the ice melt a bit. It's
Got some citrus in there. There's
Yeah.
a bit of caramel. You can
Yeah.
pick up
Yes.
some of the oak
Yes.
too
Yep.
there. And
no pepper that I could pick up.
No.
almost a touch of clove, I want to say.
Yep.
Yeah, wow. I was going to say,
That's interesting.
And that's just, and it is pretty, the ice is melted pretty good in it. I'd be interested to see what it is straight up hot.
Again, it's a $52 bottle.
Right, which to be honest, when I saw how much it was, what it had cost, I was a little
You're
surprised.
very surprised Martin sprung for it. Yeah.
Exactly.
I hate to find a point on it, but yes, you're right. But
Not that you're cheap, you're
Well,
thrifty.
Copper wire was invented by two Martins pulling on a penny.
That's true. That's true.
now, but what was the proof on this? I don't remember.
I believe it's under 100.
Yeah,
it's not.
see-
it's not a high proofer.
See,
That's the problem with the under 100s.
Yep.
Isn't it about
There is a
86 or so?
A
93, 86?
pardon the term,
at best.
sweet spot
Yeah.
of you can only let the ice melt so far.
Yeah.
And then you should almost really take the ice cube out of the.
There's some truth because it should bloom, but it doesn't continue to do so. And maybe if you have used those lower proofs with just a little smaller amount of ice,
Yes.
instead of the big chunk.
Well,
of
and that's
on
why I've always not tried to not have a whole lot of ice in mine.
But when you get up to the standard for the highest proof that we've had, I think is the Old Forester Prohibition style at 120.
No.
We
It
did,
was the Bookers. We had
Booker's was more than
after
that.
after the funeral.
126,
Big boy
wasn't-
bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Or 127, somewhere along in there.
It was in the
Yeah.
120s.
but both of them.
And I did learn when
they're
I
up
was at
there.
Beam that the Bookers goes up to about 129 is their highest, but it
Yeah,
can vary
it
from the
varies.
1 up to
Yeah.
about 129,
Yeah.
depending on where it was in the rick house.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
It doesn't stay the same.
Whereas the Prohibition style of Forester is designed at 120.
Yeah.
And I mean, it gave me a freaking headache because I had it neat the first time we had it.
That was a mistake.
Oh, that was a mistake. You're exactly right because it was not designed for that.
Right. Well, the higher proofs generally you're not necessarily expected, but the higher
those-
proofs, it is perfectly acceptable to dilute to a degree.
and
See,
it,
now
it's,
I-
it helps it find its full flowering.
See,
It does.
I was a
You're
I
going
was
to
a huge
deflower what?
Booker's fan,
Go ahead.
and my
say it if you
Booker's
must.
was always neat.
See,
I love it neat.
there's very few bourbons that I've had that were not improved by adding ice and letting
letting it bloom.
letting it bloom.
I think the Old Forester Statesman, though, you could do neat.
You could because it's not exceptionally high. I mean,
It's
we
not
didn't,
a-
we didn't
it's-
check
it's
the
a-
proof
I
on
think
it.
it's a 94.
Yeah, and it's doable. It's not as low as like the Wild Turkey, which is 84, which you could easily do that.
Yeah.
And that actually is, I think it's preferable that way.
Yeah.
But when you
Yeah.
get, for example, Wild Turkey 101,
Yeah.
totally different.
Yeah, when you
the-
get
the-
when you hit 100, really the blooming is
It's time.
essential.
It's time to add a little,
Yeah,
add a little
yeah.
bloom.
Yeah, but the Old Forester Statesman, I really enjoy and recommend, and I thought it was, again, that a lot of the same stuff that Cajun was talking about. There's There's just a lot there.
Yeah.
It's very tasty, very complex.
Old Forester brand is just
Cloves
one of
and-
the best. That and
Yeah.
Wild Turkey are probably the two
Yes.
that
And
I like the best.
I think it's easy to dismiss this one because it's got this movie tie-in to this Kingsman film series.
Right.
Oh,
uh-huh.
yes.
All that. So it's
Oh yeah.
it's got kind of a kitschy tie-in.
Yeah, but
thing.
we've talked about movie tie-ins and stuff like
Marketing.
that
It's good.
before.
It's
That's
good.
kind of it's kind of like pass that by. Don't you do that might get you into the door, but that doesn't keep you at the dance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, I think Makers is like that. Obviously they're the king of marketing. When it
Oh,
comes to-
absolutely.
to
Oh, yeah.
bourbons.
Yeah.
But honestly, the standard bottle. I mean, it's okay. It's good. It's bourbon. It's good.
Yeah.
But compared to so many that we've had, it's
yeah, we broadened our palates
yeah.
considerably.
See now,
So-
I consider Makers a cooking bourbon
right. Well,
because that
it's not.
I
to
mean,
me, it's a mixing bourbon.
See, that's
Um,
literally why one of my smokers, it's got the wax dip.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now the Maker's 46 was very good. I liked that quite a bit.
So Robert, I poured you.
The last of your Monk's Road.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? Now this is the small batch, right?
Yes, Monk's Road small batch,
Small
which is
batch.
about a $40 bottle.
Right.
As opposed
Which is
to
a
the-
really good price for this.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Fifth District is usually more around 75 or 80.
What's your proof on this one? Do you remember?
It's not a high proof either.
No, I don't think it is because of how
It's
much.
under 100 proof.
All right. Yeah.
But this is again a weeded, so it's going to have sweetness.
It's going to have sweetness. To me, this hits in the gums quite a bit, where the finish. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a finish in the stomach, when it gets
Yeah.
down there. But a lot of the back of the mouth kind of thing with, and when it's not too diluted, which really by now it really kind of is, but it's got a nice. It's really that what do we call it, Martin? The Kentucky kiss, right? When
yes.
everything really hits you in the
Feel
mouth.
in the mouth is the Kentucky kiss,
Um,
and then when it feels in the chest is the Kentucky
and we talked about this
hug.
before. It's got that cinnamon finish.
Yep.
And it's almost what hits in the back of the mouth of the gums is not quite. It's not like a sweet citrus. It's almost more like a grapefruit kind of style. Not that, but it's
Interesting.
it's
Yeah.
a kind of a citrusy with
Good.
a not a sweet. It's not exactly sour
A tang.
tang. Maybe I mean that's a good way to put it. But the cinnamon, you really can feel it on your tongue, the tip of your tongue, and on your lips, like you would with a Fireball.
Yeah, it's that warmth without that peppery taste.
Yeah. And it's to me that's a far better way. I mean, I don't know what they've done to achieve that particular profile, but if you're looking for that, that's much better than using the rye. I mean, rye is okay in very small portions to me.
Yeah.
I would not be a fan.
You're just not a fan of high rye bourbon.
I am not. I mean, they're okay. They're fine, but to me, and I've said this many times, it's if I start on that, I can't have anything else after it.
Yeah.
Because that flavors the rest of it because it just hangs around so much. Depending on the bourbon.
I'd
I'd be interested to see what you do with this Buzzard Truth my uncle introduced me to. It's a rye bourbon, but it's not like any rye I've had before.
Yeah, you had mentioned that, I think
We
in
need
our
to try
signal
that.
chap. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have some at the house. He gave me half the bottle that was left that we were working on.
Well, I
Yeah.
look forward to our next Super Chew because we're going to go deep into all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just so that kind of makes for a big consensus on Monk's Road. So a huge congrats to Wally Dant and the Log Still Distillery.
Yeah, they've done amazing jobs.
So
Yes.
because and that's the
Is this the
entry
Wally-
level
is this
Monk's
the
Right.
Wally
you know
Dant that
Monk's
I
Road.
know ended up becoming a priest?
Probably.
No.
His father was a priest. Yeah, that's right.
I was gonna say it's
Oh,
probably
okay, so
related.
This
Yeah.
is Wally's son.
This is
The
Wally.
Wally
Yeah, this
I
is Wally
know-
Jr. Yeah, the
Oh,
Wally
okay.
was a deacon,
Yeah.
Right.
and his
deacon
wife
whose
passed
wife
away,
died. Yes.
became
and
a
he
priest, so this is his
he
son.
ended up becoming
Right.
a priest.
Okay.
And this is
Not easily, I'll tell you.
They're a fairly large family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
are. And he was pastor at St. Thomas for a while. They loved him out there,
Mhm.
but he developed diabetes,
Yeah.
and
Ah.
he died earlier than most people thought he should have.
Mhm.
Wonderful fellow. I knew him well. He was.
I
a
always
good
heard
guy.
good things about him. I never
unfortunately,
met
just
him.
this
Yeah,
past
that's right.
week, was it Wally's sister that passed?
I hadn't heard. No.
Amy Dant, that was in my class, actually. Her mother.
What?
Oh, that's
really? I
sad.
remember Amy very well. No, I did not know.
See,
And they're in Wally's family. I'm not sure if it's Wally's sister or what the aunt, maybe.
maybe.
Could be an aunt, I guess. That
that's
depending on the
right.
time frame, because the years she could have been. An aunt.
There's a whole lot of dance. I went to
Yeah, I was
school
gonna say
It
that.
might have been
I went to school with
senior one.
Kathleen Dant, which was related to Amy.
But
not
yes,
related
there was a
cousins.
passing in the Dant family in the last
Very-
couple
yeah,
of weeks.
that's very
here,
sorry.
Which from
Yeah.
now it'll be about 6 weeks past when this comes
Right.
out. Or so.
That is very sad, but it also points out to the wonderfulness of the upbringing of Francis and Cajun,
Yeah, that's right.
because of where they grew up. They are surrounded by bourbon royalty.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
down to
you
it.
have ancestors, Francis, that are bourbon royalty.
Well, that's true because I directly descend from both Basil Hayden, which is a bourbon brand, and Waddy Boone, Walter
right,
Boone.
and that's
Short for Waddy.
that's
Yeah.
real royalty.
That's
That's,
I mean,
that's high level royalty.
Boone, No, Dant.
Yeah.
I mean, these are
The
these
dance
are
were related.
Beam, of
marriage.
course.
these,
Well,
these
Yes.
are the families.
That's right. Yeah.
So again, this is Wally's now third generation. In fact, we mentioned this before. The Dant family ended up in court because at some point along the line, many years ago, they actually sold the Dant name, J.W. Dant,
Yeah.
to Heaven Hill,
That's correct.
who
Mhm.
produces a J.W. Dant bourbon. And when they had started Log Still in Monks Road, they were
They wanted to
using
get it back and couldn't.
they were they were using a little bit of it in the advertising, reviving the legacy of J.W. Dant kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Heaven Hill said, "No, you're not."
But they did get awarded back the original processing license number or whatever
That is possible.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
on that they used to have for the JW.
But it-
My
it's
grandfather actually
fascinating.
worked at the Dant Distillery back in the 40s.
Yeah.
During the war, because he was too old to go to war, and that's one of the jobs that he had at that time. He had left the oil distributorship, and before he founded his own oil distributorship in New Haven, this is where he went. And my grandmother always told the story about how the Dant family was so frugal that they would use newspaper to wallpaper the holes in their
But
place.
that was a common thing.
That was
It
very
was.
common.
No,
If
it's
you
not
go
unusual
to
at all,
a
yeah.
lot of the places in old Louisville,
Yeah.
I was looking at a place once many years ago. It was definitely a fixer-upper, and the place was just covered.
It was a common practice
Yeah.
at the time, and
Because
my
it-
grandmother always thought it was strange.
Not only wallpaper, but if you tore down the walls or any plaster type, there would be newspapers wadded up and put in the
Yeah.
walls for insulation.
Right,
Insulation,
because it
yeah.
was cheap. Yeah, that's right,
Yes.
and it
Yeah.
was.
well, it actually works.
It was. Yeah.
That's not an uncommon thing for the homeless, is to use newspaper stuffed in their clothing for
Help hold
insulation.
the heat in.
Yeah, I mean, well, Green Revolution, it was like, well, let's chop up newspaper and turn it into insulation. Well, we've only been doing that for 100
Yeah.
years.
It's not a new idea.
Well, it's
Yeah.
kind
It's
of
a
like
new
the
form. packaging.
and I wish I could. I
It's-
wish I had the background for the.
Change the packaging. It's all new.
There
Well,
was
it's
somebody was
kinda
talking
like-
about the fact that ships at sea
Yeah.
use so much energy and oil and stuff like that. So they postulated an idea that maybe we should create this great big wind
A kite.
capturing
Yeah, a
kite,
kite.
that we could put out there. And of course, somebody picked up on this and wrote it, and they put a picture of an 18th century,
Uh-huh.
Galleon.
sailing ship, and it says, "How about this?"
Yeah, I
which is the-
posted that.
Yeah,
not
it
that
was
long
you that
ago.
did that,
Yeah.
okay? Because I remembered that. It was.
Oh, I missed that.
Oh,
Hell
yeah.
yeah, it
Oh,
was-
yeah.
love
yeah,
it.
This
It's
is
absolutely
the new
brilliant.
thing, is to convert tankers into sailing ships. And they think this is a new idea.
That's right. And
Well, I mean,
how-
it-
there's a
hold
reason
on.
we
How big
stopped
can sail
doing that.
have to be to drive
they realize the technology that
a
goes into
50,000
that.
ton
Look at-
tanker?
Look
Yeah.
at, there's a number of other things. Electric cars.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
It's
cars,
not a new
cars,
issue.
cars were electric when they started.
Yeah, it's
We
not
had
a new
electric-
idea.
The other thing, multi-fuel cars. We had that back then too.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
could run your Model A on kerosene if you wanted to.
Or white lightning, for that matter.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Clean burning fuel.
or biofuel.
Oh yeah, we do that already. We've got our ethanol and our
Right.
our gasoline.
Yeah.
Already 10% in most places. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that
And the
ethanol,
reason
that's
is that-
evil, because that takes bourbon seed and perverts it into
Well,
Well-
because there's no road taxes for it either.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
There's
So
a lot of
they
reason
have
for
to
that.
add bittering agents so that people won't drink the ethanol when it's straight
Well,
up
it
out.
was when my grandfather had an oil distributorship back in the 40s. He would sell fuel oil to all the farmers out in Nelson County,
Mhm.
and they were required to put a dye in it,
Yes.
so that way it couldn't be used for other things.
Actually, diesel is still that
Diesel
way
is still
because of the
there.
road taxes
Called running
and
red.
the no tax on the farm. they red coated dye on the
Yeah.
T-zone, and they can tell if you've been putting in other things that
That's
way.
correct.
instead of
My
just
grandfather,
practice.
so the story goes, was known to have mercy on a few folks that were particularly destitute, and he would
Sure.
he would withhold that so they could make the abilities to use it in other places and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
You get caught running red,
You're
they'll
dead.
they'll tag your vehicle.
Exactly, and Pop was very, very. So the story goes, very sensitive to that, and tried to help folks out best he could.
See, now that's not to unintentionally swing us out of bourbon break and back into what we're talking about, but that's the communal responsibility
That's right.
that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's
well,
right.
that's the individual doing the right thing, whether it's
Whether it's
socially
legal or
accepted
not.
or even legal.
Right.
Which is probably about time to circus back to all this anyway, ain't
Well,
it?
Yeah,
avoiding the
not-
revenuers.
Yeah,
Yes.
not standing aside and saying, "Well, that's government's responsibility." It's like, you know what, I can extend credit, or I can do a little something here and let people
Or I
Yeah,
can
and
boot- I
take
can
care of my
bootleg.
neighbors.
Well, my grandfather was known to do that because before in the 20s, he and his brother were owned a general store, and they sold a lot of the product to the moonshiners
Mhm.
throughout that.
Oh yeah,
And the fact that the house where my father grew up in was lost to the store as a debt. And according to my grandmother, that he went this is before they were married. My grandfather and his brother, Uncle Webb, went to enormous lengths not to foreclose on this family because it was the old Farrell place, and they had like 16 kids or something like that. And that it was, but sooner or later, you reach the point where you have to do that, and that's where my father grew up until he was like in the 8th grade. Was that house that had been acquired that way. And it's just kind of like you do what you can for this small community. And it goes back to that principle, I think,
Well,
of
what goes around comes around too.
very much
Yeah.
so. It goes back to that subsidiarity that we've talked
Yes.
about. That
yes.
you always do it at
that
the,
would be yes. Yeah.
the lowest possible level is the only place where justice happens because they're the only people that really give a shit.
Well,
That's my
justice.
take.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, justice can only happen at the individual level.
Absolutely. Yes.
Justice at the group level is not justice.
It's often vengeance.
It's
Okay.
often vengeance. It's often
yeah.
guised as justice, but what it really is I don't even know what I would call it.
Yeah.
But true justice,
I've had a
I
hard
think-
time with that.
That's
language.
a
So
very
we actually went from bourbon break and transitioned already back to where we were.
yeah. I
before.
didn't even
We
have
did.
to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't said a whole lot on this whole quote bit yet. I've been just
You have
sitting back
not.
and listening.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw this out here.
Do it.
Society or the group cannot survive without the individual as the outlier on the outside. It
Oh,
goes back to
absolutely.
the old sheepdog and the herd of sheep,
It's composed of individuals.
It's so
by
hard
definition.
to have new thinking or
Mhm.
some kind of entrepreneurial thinking without individualism, without
Well,
breaking out of the group.
The group will not break out of the comfortable mold that they're used to or contained within.
And history tells us we must do that at occasion.
It is it's a very
It's-
naturalistic thing because just like in chemistry, everything works towards equilibrium. Society does the same thing. It tries to find a form of peaceful coexistence.
It's
And that individual,
greatest
it
number.
can be, just as we said in the previous episode, good or evil. The choice is that individuals. I mean, it can go either way being on the
society will
outside.
cast out and excise. There's a good one right there for that.
yeah, I don't know if that's
All right,
we're not gonna
Right.
fine.
But compared to
Those who
our
do
previous-
not conform.
Charlie, we were talking about
Yeah.
previously, I mean,
Yeah.
he was an individual outlier, but he certainly did not do.
Yeah, he
his
did
thing
not
with good in
conform, and
mind.
society punished him.
right.
But he
There are
still
outliers
influenced the group.
to the good and to the bad.
Yeah.
Right, because you can become an individual without abrogating your responsibility to others.
Well, yeah, Steve
Mhm.
Jobs was an outlier,
And
you
I
know,
think
for many other reasons, and
Yeah.
sometimes that didn't
Well,
help him.
It's interesting. He was an outlier that had a lot of positive effect,
He did.
but honestly,
Yeah.
he was an asshole.
He was absolutely.
He was a
And-
total
And
asshole.
in many respects, he was for all the adulation he receives, and I'm probably gonna, but it's become known in recent days that he was very, very insulated to the point of stupidity. And his own death is just the one that nobody can get past because there were many, many treatments traditional treatments for his cancer that he
Yes.
refused
No.
to take, so he could keep on with the holistic and unproven and ultimately failing attempts at treatment that cost.
Carrot juice type.
That's
So it was like-
yeah,
Yeah.
to
It's
yeah,
like those people who say, well, my cousin's sister-in-law's brother's dog catcher saw this article on the internet, and that's why I don't wear masks because of COVID.
well, that's some of that out there is
Yeah.
you cannot conform. And I think that Steve Jobs kind of began to believe, as
Yeah.
power corrupts, here's where we go with
Yeah.
this, that he was such a special person that was so different from everybody else that he had to do it differently. That he had secret knowledge, very Gnostic.
Very Gnostic, yes.
Where that nobody else had the ability because of his power and influence. That he,
What a doofus.
well, that's correct. That's ultimately where that ends. It creates power. Not only creates insularness. That's not really a word, but
It's an echo chamber.
it's an echo
yeah.
chamber to the point where we will do what is ultimately fatal in his
Yeah.
case, because we can't think beyond it. His entrepreneurship was eventually subsumed into its own echo chamber
Right.
and dies.
Well,
And that flaw in thinking is then what leads to the insanity in the groups, nations, epoch.
true, and I'm going to
Well-
toss this out here, and Martin's probably going to like this one. You can either be liked by the group, or you can be hated and get shit done. Sometimes that's just what it boils
Well,
down
and-
to. People ain't going to like you for what you have to do.
Well,
Sometimes.
and that goes back to
that's
that
for the better the
assholeness
group
of
sometimes.
Jobs. He was able to push forth things that and get things done that may not have been possible without that.
True.
And that's
What
possibility.
ends up happening is, and I'm sorry to say I'm holding one of his products up in my
I was
hand
going to say
right
many
now.
of us.
Yes,
I'm not.
Okay.
Cajun is
But
the only one that
I'm
has
the
not gone to
outlier.
the dark side.
I'm
Right.
the outlier.
At what price?
Oh well, yeah. How much does
Because
this bad bait cost?
no,
No?
not
No,
not
no, what
that.
does it cost?
No,
Not
no.
what it costs us. What does
What
it
is
cost
it costing?
others?
What is it costing others? These things are basically made in concentration camps.
Yes.
And
Oh, yeah.
and the rare earth metals that are in these
Right.
are also made in it's child labor.
They come from the same
concentration
countries that produce. Yeah. Unfortunately, most of the rare metals that we need today are
Yes.
in that country.
camp. Exactly.
And we speak a lot.
That's
about-
China, by the way. I don't care
Yes.
if the commies know I
how
say
much
Good for you.
blood is on not only our collective hands, how much blood is on my hands?
that. In your hand.
Are
in
you
my
sure
hand.
your liver didn't come from China? They're in that business now too.
Yeah.
You know.
But I mean, to be serious, and when we look at some of the other goods that we
Makes,
have, and this is that
yeah, I mean,
grit-
it
that
makes
grit
diamonds-
mentality. It makes blood diamonds look
Yeah.
like nothing.
Yeah. I mean,
They're
I'm-
literally
the
forming organs in
damage.
China now.
yeah.
The
You know,
damage that we
price.
cause.
we've got Ford has promised billions of dollars in investments in this state to produce batteries for electric cars.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I applaud the economic investment. I think that's a great thing for Kentucky. On the other hand, electric cars are the stupidest thing.
And they have
Currently-
no disposal plan for those batteries yet. Where are we going to put them? Plus, I saw in the news this morning there is a second competitor going in down on the other side of Radcliffe somewhere they're talking about.
Wow.
battery
Michigan,
plant.
there's some outside of the Detroit metro area. There's some battery plants going in up there. So they are out. They're doing this in multiple places. Which what that tells you is, electric cars are just taking up more and more of the market. If they're putting in multiple plants across the country,
Yeah, they're not doing this.
Oh yeah.
Well,
I mean,
But-
part of it's social
they may,
pressure.
they may have peaked.
Luckily,
They may be behind on this because
Well-
I think market penetration of the electric car has peaked.
Yeah, well,
Well, I
don't
battery
know.
powered vehicles are not going to do the farming community any favors
No,
unless
they
you
will
use
not.
it to
They
run
will.
go get parts or
But-
something close.
Right.
But they
Yeah.
will eventually. Eventually, the battery technology will
Catch up.
advance and what have you, and it will be a viable thing.
And that's
Not
true for a lot of
currently.
technologies.
That's
I
the
mean,
hope. That's the plan.
We
Well, I
ain't
mean,
there yet, brother.
But
They're
we are not there
changing-
yet.
They're changing over everything and what have you. Yeah, we're premature on this.
Yeah.
Well,
But-
I
I
am
don't.
never premature. I come exactly when I wish to.
Wow. Wow. That's
Wow.
not a
Okay,
word
Okay,
boner.
Gandalf.
That's right.
That's not
exactly.
exactly a
Wow.
word
A
boner.
wizard
but,
arrives when he
yeah.
wishes, precisely when he wishes.
Sexual
There you go.
innuendo
Thank you.
from
Stole
that.
Francis.
And-
Amazing.
And speaking of building at all costs, You were mentioning the fact that it's Ford that's putting in these plants. Ford, we have a number of plants in this state.
Yeah, in the city too.
In
Yeah,
the city,
Yeah.
we've got two. Look at Ford's background. What was his empire built on? I mean,
The Model
Ford,
T.
Ford was a
Fuel combustible
Ford,
engine, basically.
Ford was
I would
a
say.
Nazi. He
Oh, in many
sponsored.
respects.
He sponsored Hitler. He's the only individual named in Mein Kampf.
I will have to take your
Well,
word for it. I've
Well,
not
but
read
he's
it.
also seen as the model.
He is.
in Huxley.
Yes, he is.
But
But
he's seen as the divinity
He
for
is.
Huxley.
and he caused a lot of damage in South America with his individual, his idea of taking the coal plants,
Yeah.
basically their idea of the coal towns, and wanting to do the same thing with the Ford plant.
Hmm.
And rubber
and
rubber,
rubber and
yeah,
everything else.
rubber.
And he's
was done the same way.
There's a lot of blood on a lot of hands.
yeah.
On the industrialists.
And
In,
the
in defense of
industrialists-
Henry Ford,
Capitalists, yeah.
he did seek to pay people
He
decently.
did.
Yes.
He did.
Yes,
And-
if it were not for obviously the unions had a great deal to do with this,
Yeah.
but he was the first manufacturer that
Uh-huh.
that voluntarily created a 40-hour
did.
work week and paid what we would call today a living wage.
He
Yeah,
paid
he
it-
learned the lessons of the Standard Oils and the
He,
JP
he wanted
Morgans
he
and
wanted his
recognized-
employees to be able to buy his own product.
Yes,
He
and
didn't
to
see
me-
any sense in the idea of I'm making a
And
product, but nobody that works on it can buy it.
I've
Yeah,
got.
and that's to be lauded. No matter
Oh,
what his
yes.
personal
Oh,
views,
yeah.
that's an awesome
Well,
thing.
There was one thing that affected all of you, including myself, that I bet you don't know Ford is responsible for because of his racism.
Oh, okay.
Ford was a racist, was not big on
Which was
African Americans,
Common at the time.
and he was of his time frame.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Unfortunately.
he believed jazz was going to be the downfall of society, white society. So, to counter that, he paid for, and the Ford Corporation still pays for today.
No, the
something-
Ford Foundation.
Ford Foundation still pays for today something that is taught in all of our American schools to this day to keep the jazz out. Square dancing. Those square dancing classes that all of you went through
Never did.
are the
Really, you guys didn't do square
responsibility-
dancing in gym class?
Nope.
Those are responsible. Those came directly from Ford's racism and hatred of jazz.
So basically, what you're
Never
saying
heard
is
that.
today's line dancing is all Ford's fault.
It is, and it's got a racist past.
Okay, before we blame all of country music on Henry Ford, what are we looking at on time, Robert? I think
It is pretty much 1:12 here, so I think it's time.
It's
For
Yeah,
time to
it's
wrap up.
time to wrap it up.
so. I don't think that completely went where I wanted it to go, but that's okay.
Well, code of honor, you never know where that's.
You never
gonna-
know, and we didn't give Robert time to like hammer anything in.
Well, I think I've probably got a few thoughts that.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody got their
so
moments.
I'm not sure the experiment worked, but we'll keep.
No, I think so.
we'll
It's
keep
just
working on it.
it's a paradigm change. That's all.
Yeah.
It's a structural change for sure.
But everybody got their time.
But yes,
And
yes,
that's
it was,
where
it was
the magic
good. It was a
is.
good
Well,
discussion.
Cajun
and,
was a little light.
no, he was very perceptive. I thought.
Yeah,
there.
well,
Oh yeah, he was perceptive. But
That's
Well,
all
you
right.
guys
and,
are-
Light
and you say you
time-wise.
willingly stepped back a little bit.
Right,
So-
right.
So that's not nobody was disenfranchised.
but it
Yeah.
was
No.
Yeah, I mean, but
I'm
it-
not shy. I'll speak up when I need
Oh, I
to.
know that's. I'm not worried. So, but it was a very good discussion of the idea between individualism is great, but what
Mhm.
is your responsibility to others when
Let's-
you
Yeah.
view yourself?
What is your
as a-
quote again? Because I would like to still kind of try and do my role as the hammer here.
All right, so let me make sure I have it here. Come on. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. So it's an indictment of groupthink.
Yeah,
Right.
Let's give Robert the final say here.
You know, it's interesting that what we focused on was the second half of that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
which obviously is,
No, I did not.
Well, I mean, I think I kept
Generally
bringing us
speaking,
back to
as-
the
as a
first
group.
half. Yeah,
Mhm.
talking about individualism and
Well-
not talking about the craziness of groupthink and
Well, I-
herd mentality and
not so
mob
much-
rules.
it wasn't so much that the individualism is what I mean, as so much as the lack of craziness, the insanity
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
in the individual, because in many ways, I think, and I think I mentioned this early, what we would call uh, psychopaths and sociopaths, which is in its own way a form of insanity, is far more common than we ever realized. So, in some ways, he is somewhat wrong on the first half of that, but it is nowhere near as common as the insanity of the group. I
Yeah.
will grant that.
And again, from his time and,
And
what he
yes.
could experience, what information he could take in 1840, 50, 60.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I got one last thought for you. Give me one other person, and I have a partner in crime. Give me a group, and I have a distraction.
Well, and that's very true.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have lamented often in Snakes and Otters is the things have devolved into a us versus them.
Yeah.
The other side is evil,
Right.
and also the group
Right.
identity.
Right. When you
yeah.
become part of the group, the other group is no longer a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
It's
are evil.
you're evil and must be destroyed.
Right, because everything is
Yeah.
framed as good versus evil.
You can't
Yes.
bargain with evil. Evil must be destroyed.
Right.
So the compromise, the great Henry Clay compromise idea of our system, is now gone.
Right. Well, and nowadays that's considered a great evil.
Yeah, in and of
Compromise.
itself.
I mean,
that's right.
the Kansas Nebraska Act, is that the one?
Missouri Compromise was
yes.
his.
1820, 1820 and 1850.
Yeah.
Where we're and he authored compromises throughout that period. I'm currently reading H.W. Brand's book about Clay, Webster, and Calhoun.
Yeah, the
Right.
second generation
And
guys.
the issue with that is, why we even in my high school history classes, we looked upon those compromises as evils, as bad things, because it perpetuated slavery.
Perpetuated slavery, and it would eventually lead to the Civil War. But
Right.
at the time, Clay thought he was saving
the
the
uni-
Union.
That's right.
And maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Who knows?
I mean, Calhoun was definitely threatening to blow the whole thing up.
Right.
So this, it was a counteraction to Calhoun to keep everything together.
Right. But so to go back to this idea, between the individual and the group isn't always crazy, and we lose sight of that sometimes.
Yeah.
I
I
think.
mean, we can do charity in groups. We can
We
we
can
can make good things happen in a
Mhm.
group.
as a matter of fact, some good things that need to be done can only be done in groups,
Cool.
because you have to combine the power, the resources, and organize them
Yeah, I
to
mean,
do those good
you can't
things.
go to the moon by yourself. There must
Amish
be.
barn raising.
Amish born raising.
Amish
Barn raising.
barn raising.
Barn
Oh,
raisings.
barn raising. Barn raising.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That's a
great
good
example.
micro example.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked. We've kind of kidded Martin with his with the libertarian view of things. In your world, you'd be driving on dirt roads or through forests because.
Are you saying that's a bad thing?
No, I'm talking about in the city. In the city, probably dirt roads and forests are a bad thing.
I wouldn't be in the city, would you?
But
Not if I could help
Probably
it.
fewer potholes than Louisville has.
probably, but
Better roads.
but Martin's. When you take Martin's
I-
libertarian stance to the extreme,
Yeah, I only claim to have a libertarian streak.
streak, yes.
Yeah.
But his responsibility ends at his driveway. Well, if that's the case, he ain't getting to work.
Yeah.
Which
But your work is at home then.
But
I do.
That is
Yes.
another.
No, I
another
mean,
subject.
in that instance, your work would be at home surviving
Mhm.
on your ranch.
Yeah. As opposed to
You wouldn't have to
working
go
for that
anywhere.
evil government.
Well, which is where I'm going. There is a place for the group as much as there is a place for the individual.
yeah,
As you
yes,
mentioned,
yes.
Martin, the entrepreneurial spirit, that spirit of innovation, whether it's as an entrepreneur or just as a scientist coming up with new and great things.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Although the individual inventor is dead, really.
Excuse
all-
me?
Well, the
It's really
complexity.
so. What multi-trillion-dollar idea have you taken to market all on your own?
Actually, I'm just getting ready to.
Really? Well, when it hits multi-trillion dollars, let's talk.
We'll see.
But
So-
I think that's a valid point in that
We knew him when.
you have to have both.
You have to have
Uh-huh.
both.
The
Everything has to be
individualism,
balanced.
yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to. The individual can have the spark, But to make it really fan into a flame,
The group
You've
has
got to
to-
get the
you
group
bring
involved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you bring others
That's
in.
very true. Yeah.
It is.
Marketing,
Industrialization cannot happen on an individual basis.
What can't?
Industrialization.
Well,
Yeah.
but who's to say that industrialization was a good thing?
Well, good or bad, it's probably neither. But
Bringing
it is
it, yeah.
necessary in certain
Yeah,
levels.
bring a good idea to others.
You can't make a
others
car except
requires
through
help.
industry. That's
You got to
right.
have
And-
help.
And so many things you have to balance, and this is true of individual rights and responsibilities all the way up to the group rights and responsibilities. You have to balance one against the other.
Mhm.
The individual, in his supposed sanity, ideally there are enough of them to keep the group from doing really insane stuff, like putting people in
Mhm.
railroad cars and sending them off to be gassed.
Yes.
Not enough individuals were able to stand up against that, or were even willing to even
Or
think
even
about
Yeah,
it.
the
willing.
willing part.
There were
Uh,
so few that were willing.
But then there's also the group that has to call out the individuals for, look, you can't do that anymore. That's just plain freaking wrong. You can't go around lynching people.
Holocaust.
Well, I mean,
Yes,
well,
yeah.
Lynching.
I don't know if that's not a group saying to individuals. I mean, because that's
It's
Well, it did happen.
There's a
well,
testament.
it did. Yeah, I'm not saying it didn't
Yeah.
happen.
No,
I'm
yeah.
to
saying
that
that
one person influencing a group who then need to stand.
Well,
There's something to standing with others to
Yeah.
do the right thing.
right.
Mhm.
And as far as Cajun's example, that's more of a yes, that was one person driving the whole concept because that's a Hitler thing. But you know what? He still couldn't have done that without all of those other people
Mhm.
around him who were actually competent compared to him.
Yeah.
He was the orator, but personally he's kind of incompetent in the things he took on. Should have left the military alone.
He was
Thank
the
God
cult-
he didn't.
Well, he was the cult leader.
He was the
Yeah.
cult leader,
Very much so.
and you have to be careful. The group sometimes have to pull the individual back.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of the cult leader, the Manson, the Jim Jones,
Uh-huh.
but then
Joel Osteen.
and the Joel Osteen,
L. Ron Hubbard.
the L. Ron
Yeah,
Hubbards,
absolutely.
yes. And then society, an individual has to say to the society, it's like, no, we need to blaze new trails.
Yeah.
Whether that's an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
We have to have those people who are willing to do the new thing, even if it's unpopular.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to have the group to say, yeah, you've gone too far.
Awesome. Well done, sir. Well done.
Excellent job.
So, Francis, sir, what is next time?
Can we say hoopajube, folks?
Whoop-a-doo.
That's right.
Yeah.
We are going, thanks to Cajun's wonderful hospitality, we're going out to location C for our next recording sessions, and we're going to talk about bourbon because we're going to go to bourbon.
We're going to the Holy
We're
Land.
going to the Holy
Going
Land.
to
We're
the Holy,
going-
the
we're go-
Kentucky Holy Land.
We're going
Mhm.
to Bourbon Fest in Bardstown, Kentucky here in September, and we are going to experience it in its full
It's incredible.
glory. And
Right.
we're going to tell all our listeners all about
Mhm.
it. So you think we've been bourbonites before. We're about to be anointed, guys. It's going to be
Yes.
some
Now,
fantastic
what's the one
stuff.
that goes on in Louisville with all the big musical groups and all that's going on?
Bourbon and Beyond is the
Bourbon and
music
Beyond.
thing.
That's the music thing.
Yeah,
And
this-
that's-
We're going to the Bourbon Fest.
Which
Do
is
not mention the rivalry of Bourbon Beyond. These Louisvillian lights started it up trying to knock
Trying to-
our Bourbon Fest.
Yeah,
Well,
Bourbon Fest has been
down.
going on for many, many, many years.
it has, yes. It is. It is the
be,
original.
We will have more swag than you can imagine.
Because it's
guys.
focused on food and bourbon and
I gotta say, though,
music.
I really am disappointed that I can't see some of the groups that are going to be at Bourbon. I mean, I couldn't afford to go see them anyways, but there are a few groups that are going to be at Bourbon and Beyond that I would love to go see.
Yeah. We'll be bourboned up pretty daggone well next episode, though, folks. So make sure you're here.
We hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern, just in time for your morning commute. And every fifth Friday, we drop a special Hoopajube episode. Spread the word we are on all the major platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com. Join us next time. Same snake time, same otter channel.